Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording from our Shavuot all-night learning sessions with Rabbi Brad Artson.
I want to apologize in advance for my dicey voice. I've had some allergy stuff all week long. I feel better than I sound. I know I sound god-awful. So here's what I want us to think about, building on Rabbi Brause's wonderful teachings. Hevruta is something people make a very big deal out of in the rabbinic world. It turns out it has somewhat of a mixed reputation. Right? So don't believe the rabbis who tell you that Hevruta is the ideal for studying. That is not the case. There are plenty of rabbis in the Talmud who can't study in Hevruta. They need to study by themselves. I'm one of those people. I love Hevruta. It's a great way to schmooze. It's a great way to talk. It's a great way to do a lot of things. But then I have to sit and actually learn the stuff all by myself afterwards. So let's just keep that to ourselves when Rabbi Brause comes back with her cookie. That's just between us. But here's what I want to suggest is really liberating and shocking about Hevruta. American culture assumes a kind of Valentine's Day ideal about romantic love. Your eyes are supposed to lock across a crowded room. Your heart goes pitter-pat. You are swept off your feet. And then, madly in love, you and Prince Charming ride off into the sunset. And nobody ever tells you how the two of them woke up the next morning. What his breath smelt like. The woman had been lying in a glass-plated tomb for at least a week. Can you imagine what that was like to wake up to? Right? And then somebody had to make breakfast, and the short little guys weren't around to do the kitchen work anymore. But the movies are done at that point. And so we are told to put this incredible pressure on this one person who has to be our sun and our moon, the everything of our life. Now, it's a little awkward for me to be the one to tell you that, because I did happen to find that person who's in the room, and so I just want to be very clear, very unambiguous about this, but I realize for most people it's just more complicated. And what I think this can offer to us, what I want us to learn Hevruta about tonight, is the idea that you can have more than one your person. We can have our person for this kind of conversation, our person for that kind of activity, our person for something else, right? That the unbearable pressure that the one person you dump everything on, you share everything with, and they are expected to respond in a transparent way that's always appropriate and not always what you want them to respond with, but always for the best. Well, that may be asking a little much. So let's just look for a moment, setting family values aside, at biblical and rabbinic culture. What is the primary relationship in the Bible or in Mishnah Talmud? What is the person's primary connection? Thank you, God. Which, notice in the last class, not that I want to compare, when we talked about intimate relations, that wasn't on the list. Because we automatically go to the human plane. But a big part of what Judaism is saying is one of the things that makes God's job description so vital is you're asking too much of a human person. You actually should be thoughtful about what thoughts you share with your destined partner, because not everything you think is going to be something they're going to want to walk around holding for the rest of their lives. Right? That's what God is for. Right? And so I want to put that on the Hevruta list. Having someone you can talk to night and day, say anything to, and in part because they already knew it, they're fine with it. Actually, not fine with it. God has a bit of an anger management issue that I think we've all been trying to help with over the years. I do see some hints of progress. But God is one of those people in our lives. And then the rabbis ask, who else? Who else of the great figures of the Bible, other than God, what are their other primary connections? Pardon me? Spouses. So can you name a biblical figure that shares significant internal information with a spouse? Sarah. Who shares with Sarah? What does she share with Abraham? She has pain about not having a child. And what's Abraham's response? He sleeps with her maidservant. Lucky guy. The patriarchs don't turn to the matriarchs for their primary emotional sustenance. Okay, fair enough. So the claim here is we are rarely privy to their inner life. But we are very privy to David's inner life. Does he turn to his spouse to share that journey? No. No. The rabbis, you just heard from Rabbi Brous, one of the classic stories of rabbinic Hevruta, right? He marries off his sister to his Hevruta. We don't know how she felt about this, right? And he did that as a way to cement his relationship with his Chaver. So that may not be a norm we want to replicate, but I do think that what we do want to give ourselves permission for is the American romantic notion of intimacy has to be exclusively with your partner is poisonous. I don't think it's a coincidence in this culture that makes that demand normative about marriage that so many marriages break up. I would hypothesize the marriages are actually better than they think they are. But what they expect marriages to be is so extraordinarily brittle and impossible to attain that they keep thinking their marriage is broken. Right? In Fiddler on the Roof, Goldie did not have that problem. Right? We're raising the kids, we've put away the chickens for the night, roll over and go to sleep. So let's look at the idea that intimacy comes from places we don't expect. And that's okay. If you walk away from this shiur with any lesson, that's what I want you to walk away with. What Rabbi Brau said about the need to be seen is absolutely, fundamentally vital to being human. It's just that, other than God, everyone is going to get pictures of it. How many times have you talked to or been a child at a parent's funeral, and the child who is grieving is shocked by what other people are saying about their deceased parent? Right? When my father died, people said things about my dad I had no idea. It turns out he had other relations. Right? So that, I want to give us permission, because what Hevruta opens up to us is the liberating idea that each relationship comes with its own criteria. And English destroys that because we come up with a term for it. Ilana is my wife. That means that she and all wives should be compared by the same yardstick. But of course, if instead of using husband and wife, you said Brad and Ilana, well, then that's incomparable. That's us too working out what it means to share a life. Labels end up crushing us in the weight of their artificial expectation. So let's take a look at some of these texts about what Hevruta offers us in terms of intimacy, in terms of making room for our own distinctiveness, in terms of not reducing to some abstraction. Someone want to read the first one? I've given it to you in Hebrew and in English. Great. Go ahead. Nice.
The Lord said to Moses, "Acquire for yourself Joshua, the son of Nun." The word acquire here implies acquisition at much cost, for a companion is acquired after difficulties upon difficulties. Hence, say the sages, a person should acquire a companion for everything, for reading scripture together, reciting Mishnah together, eating together, drinking together, and disclosing all one's success together.
All one's secrets together. Wonderful, thank you. All right, so take a look. The italics is the biblical quote. All right, we are told, excuse me, to acquire for yourself Joshua, son of Nun. And the rabbis noticed that, yes. Yes. No. What I can offer you is, if you're sitting next to someone who also has a sheet of paper, then if one of you could share it with someone in the Mizzi section, that would be great. And you should definitely talk to the management about how many copies they made. But we can read it out loud again. So the book of Numbers says to Moses that he should acquire Joshua, son of Nun, and that's an odd thing to use as a phrase for your new chaver. Why acquire? And the answer that they give is that it's not easy, that this acquisition is at great cost. So let's start with, what is the cost of Hevruta? What is the cost of acquiring a chaver? In your own lives, what's the cost? Yeah. Time, right? So time with a chaver is time you're not spending with other obligations in your life, and that puts a limit to how many you can have, right? What else? Yeah. Giving of yourself, right? It can't just be about what you get out of it. You have to be able to be sharing to keep this relationship going. You had something? Trust. Right, because if you're expecting to be blown away every time you share something, you're not going to do that. So there has to be a level of trust. Yes? Pardon me? Say it again. Emotional investment. Yeah, did you notice on that list that it talks not only about reading Mishnah together, reading Torah together, but it says share all your secrets? Like, that's kind of surprising how that got on the same list. Right? But this is not a transactional thing. Right? If you want to make someone a chaver, it can't just be, I'll give you this, you give me that. There has to be something that is really emotionally open and mutual.
I would say ego.
What about ego?
You have to give up or reduce your ego so that you can truly listen and learn sometimes. It's a way of almost compassionate listening. Being willing to reduce your ego so that you can really hear what your Hevruta.
Okay. Great. I never know what people mean by reducing ego, because to some degree, if you're not willing to bring your own distinctive individuality into the relationship, then there's no one there to relate to. So let's say, good. So I love that you talk about compassionate listening, right? And I just want to highlight, compassionate comes from the two Latin terms, com, to share, passio, feelings. That means you have to have feelings that you bring to it. So the notion of ego-free or complete transparent isn't the Jewish ideal. Come with your ego, but an ego that is fed by connection, relationship. Right? Yeah. Yes. Freedom. Great. Hevruta has to take place in freedom. You have to be able to object. You have to be able to say, I'm not going to be busy. You have to be able to say, this isn't working for me at some point. Right? There needs to be freedom at every level to be able to grow as a chaver. Pardon me? You lose some freedom. Yes. As in any committed relationship. Hey, when I tell a joke, you should laugh. There was nothing funny about that, and that wasn't a joke. Compromise. Good. So there is, look, we're all using the language of dynamism and interaction, right? Yes, last comment. Okay, so our friend No Spring Chicken, he, is claiming that you young people use your technology as a way to distance yourself from other people. Have you ever tried talking to my mother when her phone rings? No. My mother, God bless her, 92 years old. She should live and be well for many, many more years. I don't think there's a teenager in the world who has got a greater barrier between them and the person they're with because of technology. I think that's actually an old people concern about young people. And so here's what I want to say. If Hevruta is about that open, dynamic connection, then as is always true, you have a good impulse and you have a bad impulse, and you can twist anything out there in the service of your evil urge. It's not the thing that is evil, it's what you do with it, or how you let it sweep you away. It's not Facebook, it's not the internet, it's not even artificial intelligence. Frankly, some of my best friends seem to have mostly an artificial intelligence. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Oh, wait, sorry, I want to say one other thing. Look at what it lays out for us, that what you do with the companion is read scripture together, recite Mishnah together, eat together, drink together, disclose all your secrets. I want to highlight the middle part of that. right? Everyone who's seen Fiddler on the Roof knows that rabbinical students shuckle in the same table with big books in front of them. That's easy, right? I actually run a rabbinical school where they now shuckle in front of open computer screens, which is a little more confusing. And then every now and then when they're doing that, I walk behind them and I see what's on the computer screen, and that can be very shocking. Okay, and the sharing secrets, that's kind of obvious too. But what's the middle part? You should be eating and drinking together. What's that? That's the building block of relationship. For God's sake, you can't always work on relationships by working on relationships. Sometimes you just got to live together. Right? So have a meal and let it just be a meal. Right? Go for a walk. Do something entertaining, something fun. Sometimes that's what life is built out of. Right? And so this idea of Hevruta here is not always about thinking deep thoughts or memorizing scripture or plumbing the depths of your own inner life that you've never revealed before. Sometimes it's just pastrami. I translated that into Ashkenazic for those of you who need that. Okay, the next one was already quoted by our rabbi, O Hevruta, O Mituta, either companionship or death. What does that phrase remind you of? Great. I don't know how they teach this anywhere outside the United States, because this always strikes me as the equivalent of Patrick Henry. Right? And I also think it says something deep about our two cultures. That American culture, by and large, prioritizes abstract ideals over actual lives. We do that all the time. Our society has made a slaughterhouse out of prioritizing abstract ideals and not letting actual people get in the way of that. And this is saying the opposite. This is, if I can't have human connections, I'm as good as dead. That's not a life. And I want to be clear that Hevruta does not require constant physical presence of other people. All right, so I've referred to her before in this talk, but I'll say it again. There's not a moment in my life when I don't know exactly how my mother feels about what's happening to me, or what she would say if she were standing right here, as she would have a lot, by the way, to say about what I just told you guys. Right? I'm in a constant Hevruta with my mother, even though she lives in San Francisco. Right? My father died 3 years ago. He and I are in an endless Hevruta together. Right? I've been with Alana long enough. I do not need to ask her what she thinks of something. I know exactly what she thinks of it and what she's going to say to try to throw me off the scent. And I know that about my kids, too. It turns out being alive is being in a web of intimacies. There is no such thing as a solitary person. Right? At no point in your existence are you ever alone, ever. Before you are born, you're used to certain voices. You're used to certain foods, certain rhythms, certain times of life. That continues throughout your entire lifetime. At no point are you ever yourself in opposition to the world. The world flows through you. Right? And so O Hevruta O Mituta is, in a sense, the Jewish answer. You do not prioritize ideas over people. The only reality are the people. And ideas are true only to the degree that they make the people more visible, more present, more real. But it's a stunning inversion. Okay, someone want to read the line from Bava Kama? That was not really a request.
There's a proverb. If you lift the burden, I will help lift it. If not, I will not.
Great. What is the point of that proverb? If you lift it, I will help lift it. If not, not. What's that saying? Yeah, Brian.
So at summer camp, there was a song that we used to sing during Havdalah, which had a very similar effect. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk beside me and be my friend, and together we will walk in the path of Hashem. I feel like that's what it's getting at. Hevruta, or in this case, just any struggle, is, at the risk of stating what I think might be your conclusion, a process. Since we talked about dynamism earlier, it is two people working together, sharing an energy toward a particular goal.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Right? So this dynamism, this process, isn't instead of your putting in effort. Right? Your haver doesn't make your burden go away. Your haver does know what feels burdensome to you. Your haver does say, when you get yourself ready to lift that burden, you won't have to do it alone. I'll be there with you. I'll help you lift that burden. But if I were to say, you sit back, I'll take care of it, then it turns out that's the opposite of Hevruta. That's not helping you grow. That's not helping you realize you can face what you need to face. The point is, you can do this, and you won't be by yourself when you have to. Right?
I would think it also means if you model by doing something, rather than, you model it by actually taking an action. That is more important. If you lift it, then I will lift it. But if you just don't lift it, and you're just talking or whatever, it's not a good example. I'm not going to respond in a very positive way. I want to see what you do. And then that modeling is more important to me, almost. And I want to see where you go, how much authenticity is in your communication. And when you're authentic, then I can be authentic.
Great. I love that. And yes?
Isn't this also God? If I go for a burden, if I'm, expressing or wanting to do something, that God will be there as my Hevruta at that point too.
Beautiful. So if God can be one of our Hevrutot, if God can be a Haver for us, then God also isn't stepping in so that you don't have to do the work. Right? And that we see throughout our sacred literature, right? God will help you face the burdens you have to face, but God's going to work through you. So it's not you sitting back and saying, go ahead, God, I'll let you handle this one, right? It's, roll up your sleeves and get ready for God and you to do something extraordinary. Yeah. Okay, next one. One that walks with the wise shall be wise, it says in the book of Proverbs. A parable. When a person walks into a spice vendor's shop, even if nothing is sold or purchased, nevertheless, upon leaving, that person and garments will exude a fragrant aroma, and the fragrance will not leave the entire day. But one that walks with fools shall smart for it. Parable. When a person walks into a tanner's shop, even if nothing is sold or purchased, nevertheless, when the person leaves, the person and garments will reek with stench, and the vile odor will not leave the entire day. What does that piquant little simile here tell us about the nature of Hevruta?
It's sort of like Be careful of the company you keep.
Great. Be careful of the company you keep, right? Because humans, their emotions, their moods are contagious, right? And so I assume I'm not the only one in the room who has experienced that. If you hang out with someone who will always snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, you walk around being that same disgruntled muppet that I've become. And I know who I blame. Right? Yeah.
I think there's a flip side of that, though, in that you also impact the person who you are studying with or in relationship with. So if the other person is Amharitz, you have the opportunity to raise them up as well. So how much are you willing to put yourself at risk and risk taking on their negative energy if you're going to bring that positive energy?
Right? This guy should be a rabbi. Right? So one of the things about Hevruta is it can involve the conscious choice to take on someone's negativity. That can be a gift that a chaver gives to a chaver. Right? I know you're going through a really hard time. I know you've been really battered, and at this point in your life, you can only see through the wounds. And knowing that, I'm going to enter and I'm going to stand with you. And the degree of protection that I offer myself is I'm aware of what's holding you back right now. And so I'm going to enter in not for a mugging, but I know what I'm standing in. And I'm going to give you the resilience to help you lift yourself using my energy. Right? And I really believe that's true. I really do believe that we have energy that we give out, and that mindfulness is the tool to not simply be buffeted by the energy people dump on you. But it's not easy, right? You have to, as you're feeling the undertow, ask yourself, what's doing this? Why am I feeling I'm about to be swept away? And then that mindfulness gives you the capacity to say, I get it, and I don't have to give in to it. But I need to be able to stand in a place of sympathy. I need to be able to it's not a matter of judging, right? I know why you, pathetic person, are feeling this terrible right now. It's really, I get it. If I were going through what you're going through, I would be feeling that too, right? And I would be relying on someone who cared for me enough to hold out a hand to let me know that even in my feeling abandoned, deserted, drowning, there is someone standing with me, someone who will help me get upright again, right? Okay, so you walk into a scented place, you're going to come out smelling like the scents, right? And if you go into a stinky place, you're going to come out stinking, right? But what if the secret to that then is not to avoid those places, it's to be deliberate, to determine when the moment calls for it, right? There are times in the life of the people around you where the only thing you can do is enter into their brokenness and be their borrowed strength. Right? That's Hevruta also. Okay.
Could I, over here?
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking about something else. As the example that you gave about the scent and so on. What about laughter? When you tell a joke or someone tells a joke, and it's truly funny, the whole room, a couple of people start to laugh, and then laughter sometimes is contagious. So I'm thinking in terms of if I have to say, what you were just saying sounds kind of dismal. So I'm thinking in terms of the other side of it.
Great.
To talk about laughter.
So the contagion, excuse me, the contagion is not only the desperate feelings, the sense of an undertow. You're right. We can use tools to unify the room, right? One of those is humor. Rabbi gets up in front of you, says something you did not expect to hear from the rabbi. There's that beautiful crackling moment of silence and then laughter, right? And suddenly the whole room is one. The other way that happens routinely is music, right? So my son, No, I've always thought that Beth Am had some feelings towards me. Wow, that was biblical. So, thank you, appreciate that. I am so wounded now. Right? So humor brings us together, so does music. Right? One of the powerful tools is that, if you think about it, the human mind is rare in its ability to do this kind of Vulcan mind meld, right? That if someone is playing a tune, you and they are processing the same sensations and the same feelings. Right? And that's, I think, why it's so powerful during a worship service when the music is really getting you out of your chair and up and standing and moving, and the whole room is moving to that music. We become one. And that in itself is an extraordinary gift, a kind of Hevruta of the whole. Right? That's everyone together. Other thoughts about this? Otherwise, we're going to move on. Okay. In the days of Rabbi Chia the elder, a starling came up from the land of Israel. Some people brought it to him and said, "Can we eat it?" That just shows our people's beautiful appreciation of ornithology throughout the ages. Oh, look, a species that has never been in our land before. Do you fricassee it? He replied, "Go and place it on a roof, and any bird that comes to rest near to it will be of its kind." So they went and placed it on the roof, and an Egyptian raven came and rested next to it. And seeing that, Rabbi Chia said, "The starling is not kosher, because it belongs to a species of the raven, and that we all know is prohibited by a verse in Leviticus." Hence the popular proverb, "The raven went to the starling only because it is of its own kind." This proverb, by the way, is not often heard in Beverly Hills, but I'm thinking we should bring it back. Okay, so, and by the way, for those of you who are on this warpath that AI and technology is the problem, this is the kind of stuff that happens in a society to have enough entertainment. Right? Okay, so what's going on with that raven? What is the point of this raven story? Birds of a feather. See, there is such a proverb. Correct. Right? So if you don't know what it is you're looking at, check out what it associates with. And that is a way to figure it out. Right? So I don't know what this bird is, but I'm going to watch the birds that hang with it. That feels to me like a brilliant metaphor for so many things that happen in life. I'm not really sure what that exchange just meant. But can I associate? What does that remind me of? What does that look like? Have I ever had a similar feeling with an encounter before? Can I go with that association? This is a statement, one second, about trusting a kind of broader social intuition in which like helps illustrate what's going on, even if you can't categorize it. Right? But I also want to say there's an interesting kind of objectification that happens here. Right? I don't know what this bird is, but I'm going to define it by the birds that hang out with it. And haven't we all experienced that in our lives too? Where we get defined by who we hang out with, and there are people who will take a look and say, I don't want to hang with you because you're that kind of person. You're the person these people hang with. When I went from grade school to high school, I had a friend who said, this is our chance to reinvent ourselves. Like, they don't know what 8th grade Brad was like, so 9th grade Brad can be totally different, right? And life does occasionally present you with, I'm not going to hang out with the same birds that were hanging out with me before, right? Yes?
I would look around to see who my boyfriend's friends were and how they treated other people, because he was treating me great because he was so this way I could see what really was going on, how he treated other people and how other people treated him. Then I knew who I was really.
Wonderful. So you all heard that, right? So that, by the way, is an interesting piece of Talmudic logic. You can tell the validity of an argument by the points that they weren't relying on, right? The points that were not core to what their main point was, you can trust those side statements. Same idea. So you watch someone and you see how are they in relationships that aren't the ones where they're after your intellect, your personality, your presence. I'm sure that's what you meant. Other thoughts? Yeah.
I mean, when you observe people, maybe when you're getting when you're getting to know them, like how if you're out with somebody and you've just met them, and how they treat the waiter or the person who's, not maybe they think is on their level, and I think those kind of signs can tell you when someone's not like being on their best behavior, maybe to impress you or something.
Good. So part of it is not watching how they treat the people who they look up to for legitimate or social reasons, but the people who they think should be subservient, right? And that does tell you a lot about somebody, right? Other comments about these birds? Yeah, sir.
I think this also speaks to me in that sometimes you feel drawn to certain people for certain things and you don't know why. And you should kind of look at the other person. And I think it cuts both ways, right? I think sometimes you think positively of them, and that means that their ideals you can aspire to. But then I think also sometimes if you see something in them that doesn't quite sit right with you, then maybe you're projecting a little bit. And so I think of the internal starling going to another raven and just kind of figuring out from there what you're really looking at, both good and bad.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
Rabbi Tuishkin, in his book Jewish Values, has one of the values is about exactly what you were saying. If you want to get a sense of who somebody is, see how they treat a waiter or a waitress at a restaurant on a first date, and it sources back to when Eliezer is going to find a partner for Yitzchak, and Eliezer, prays to God, asking that may this person not only be somebody that's good to me, but also to my camels. And when he encounters Rivka, the first thing she does is she brings water for the camels, which we take for granted nowadays with modern day plumbing, but that was a big task to undertake, carrying a lot back and forth. And that was the first sign that he had that this was the, God willing, the second matriarch of our people. So,
great, thank you. Good points.
I wonder if you know, or if anyone here knows, if the starling actually is related to the raven, or was it just a... They're not?
They're not particularly clever.
I mean, that's even more interesting, right? Like, there's something...
Right. So look, what I want to point out for those of you who are concerned about such thing is that no actual birds were used in the formation of this story. Like most things most rabbis say, it may or may not be connected to reality, but it certainly happened in some rabbi's head. Present company not counting. So, right, so no, starlings are not related to ravens, which makes the story even weirder, doesn't it? Right? But really interesting. They're trying to make a point. Well, I'm assuming that their audience in this story, this is Midrash Mishlei, so it's like 9th century, right? And they're still primarily agrarian. They have not yet gone urban on us. So these are people who know the local birds and the local bird migrations. You know, the land of Israel is part of a huge bird migration from Africa through to Europe and Asia. They know the difference between a raven. Y'all know ravens because they live around here too, right? And starlings are quite different. But what they're willing to listen to, and I'm going to just say something homiletic. This may not be worth much. Maybe if the raven and the starling feel a bond, that's something to take seriously. Right? The goal is not to talk the raven out of the starling, but to say the raven has picked up on something that we hadn't noticed in our system of making categories. And isn't that often true of, you know, the kinds of friendships we have? Or look at how people in the romantic choices will often have an objective list of categories that ends up having to do in no way with the actual person they end up choosing. Maybe this is a story about your Hevruta has the capacity to surprise you. You may feel yourself drawn to someone who you have no idea why you're drawn to this person, but maybe we should trust that. Homiletical move, worth what you paid for.
About this individual, just because he happens to be, you know, the ravens happen to be drawn to the starling, whereas this starling might be incredible. Maybe the starling really is kosher, but you're judging it based on his association rather than looking at the individual starling itself.
Correct. Good point. Thank you for the concern. That is a reasonable concern, as it is in the other direction as well. Right? Meaning, starlings who consistently hang out with ravens, you got to think it means something. Right? So, and by the way, the starling doesn't want to be kosher. I want to be very clear about that. Years ago, I went out with a women's group at my synagogue in Orange County, and we went to the local Coco's, and they had a special on shrimp. And the waitress had this big bumper sticker thing on her chest. It's not called a bumper sticker when a person wears it. She had this whatever that thing was, and it said, "I like shrimp." And I asked if I could have it. And the people I was with went bananas. Like, you can't wear that. You're a rabbi. And I said, people who like shrimp don't fry them and eat them. I'm the only one in this restaurant who is a genuine friend of shrimp. Right? Can we continue? Yes.
And we really think the dove is so amazing. It comes back with the olive branch, and how do we reward it? We eat it. So.
Right. The dove is so wonderful that we continue to sacrifice it on the altar, whereas the raven is flying out there saying, "See ya, sucker." Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to continue with some text for a moment. One who joins to those who commit transgressions, though not doing what they do, will nevertheless receive punishment as one of them. Talk to me about that.
If you lie with dogs, you wake up with fleas. Same thing with like the tannery and absorbing the unpleasant odor from the tannery.
Okay. So you are in some ways part of an activity even if you don't personally participate in it. Right? Is that true? Are you an accessory to the crime? Yeah.
I remember reading a story that struck me because someone had driven his friends to a store, and then they ended up robbing the store, and then they came back, and then he drove them home, and then he was the getaway driver, and it was like, because he had driven them there and driven them home, he was charged with the entire crime. So I definitely believe that in normal American law, this definitely still applies. And, I'm sure many of us have situations where something like that, not exactly driving someone to, but you're with a group of people and suddenly the whole group is targeted as once. I mean, I think we're worried about that all the time in these days.
Great. So we do get targeted by the labels of choices the people we hang out with make, right? Sometimes legitimately and sometimes not legitimately. What do you do? What does that have to do with Hevruta? Anything? Yeah.
If to be a companion, and Rabbi Brauss spoke about this too, means you sometimes sit with someone and do nothing, if you are with someone who is doing something that is unkind or illegal in some way, it's hard to tell whether doing nothing, just being with them, in fact, you're colluding or otherwise encouraging.
Sure. So we can all come up with examples in our minds where knowing what someone either has done or intends to do and doing nothing is a kind of guilt, right? If I'm an educator, right, I have a legal obligation. If someone tells me that they are intending to harm themselves, I legally have to report that, right? If someone tells me that they've been harassed or abused, I legally have to report that, right? And that represents the law's moral judgment, that there are some places where you cannot sit silently by, right? Maybe that's partly what this is saying too. Anyone who hasn't yet spoken, yes?
Someone earlier talked about being in relationship as limiting freedom, or being in Hevruta, and this text indicates by choosing to enter into the relationship, we become obligated. And someone else talked about the idea of the tanner and visiting the tanner as kind of bringing your sweet-smelling self into the nasty-smelling place as a way of kind of possibly being able to shift that energy. This is the limit case. You can do that, but when that person starts to commit sins, you're now obligated to either help them not do that anymore or to disassociate.
Wonderful. So what Rabbi Timoner is suggesting here is it's not about are you without limits when you're out of relationship, and being in a relationship you suddenly are. It's that the choice to enter in Hevruta changes the parameters of your limits. There are opportunities that become possible only when you're in the context of that kind of a relationship. And there are possibilities that are no longer open to you. Right? But isn't that true of everything we choose in life? right? Everything we choose in life opens some doors and closes some doors, right? And so choosing to be in relationship is saying, I choose for the doors that are going to open, and I do that knowing that that closes some other doors, right? And it feels like a gain, right? So I think that's part of what's being said here. It is absolutely an obligation you take on. Anyone who hasn't spoken yet?
More of a question to the text or of the text. The verb, which is not wrongly translated as joins, one who joins those, it's hamidabek, devek, one who clings or glues themselves to others that are committing, who are doing bad stuff. And I think we could wonder, what is that? What does that say? Is it about desire? Is it about wanting to be? Is it about putting ourselves in situations? And I just want to contemplate the many ways we could understand that verb and apply it to ourselves.
I love that. The idea that we become stuck with other people or stuck to other people. And is that itself an invitation to unstick ourselves when someone does something that becomes a betrayal of what the Hevruta was supposed to be? Right? I can't remain stuck with you. 5 minutes. Okay. Great. So we are at the end of our learning together. I want to close with the final one on the second page. A fellowship and a family are like a pile of stones. When you remove one stone, the pile falls apart. I love that image. We are, each of us, the sum total of all of our connections. And whenever you shift one, the whole pattern shifts. The totality shifts, right? All are connected, each to all, right? And each of us is a unique collection of all those stones, all of those points. It feels to me that Hevruta, properly understood, is a way of building ourselves more expansively, more inclusively. And that if we can step outside of the constricting Western habit of seeing things through labels rather than through actual people, if instead of coming up with a definition of Hevruta, we recognize that each encounter in each moment is the opportunity for something distinctive and unique. And we don't try to define it, we experience it. That person, in that moment, in an unprecedented way, then it's an invitation to infinite growth, that we're always asked to be more than we have been. Trusting that we will take with us everything we need, but that the us we will discover in the context of those relationships will be the one worth taking the journey for. Shalom.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.